Welcome back to the toughest of the type, the series where we look at trainers of a specific type and see who provides the toughest challenge in their initial battles. And this time around we're looking at the ground type. We'll find out once and for all who the greatest earthbender is, at least in Pokemon. First, let's look at what's inherently tough about the ground type itself. Ground types tend to be slow and bulky, and are more often physical attackers over special attackers, which makes sense with Earthquake being one of the best moves. Learn set wise, ground type learn sets tend to be somewhat limited, usually being dependent on a secondary typing. Mono ground types tend to only learn ground and normal moves, with a few rock moves thrown in for good measure. Ground moves are effective against fire, electric, rock, poison, and steel, are resisted by grass and bug, and deal no damage to flying types or Pokemon with levitate. Defensively, ground is weak to grass, water, and ice, resists rock and poison, and is immune to electric. While this does include status moves like Thunder Wave, an important distinction is that ground types are not immune to paralysis, so moves like Body Slam or abilities like Static can paralyze a ground type. Finally, ground types are immune to Sandstorm damage. But with that, it's time we look into the specialists of this type. Let's find out who the greatest ground specialist is. We start in Kanto, where we meet the very first ground specialist, the self-proclaimed strongest trainer Giovanni. Giovanni is not only the final gym leader of the Kanto games, but he's also the leader of the notorious Team Rocket. But let's see if there's any validity to his self-proclaimed title. In red and blue, his team is Rhyhorn, Dugtrio, Nidoqueen, Nidoking, and Rhydon. And looking at their specific movesets, they are certainly the most Gen 1 movesets, aren't they? Only his Dugtrio and Rhydon know actual ground moves, and the rest only know normal moves aside from Nidoqueen and Nidoking. You could pretty easily sweep this team with a water type. The most dangerous Pokemon here is probably Dugtrio. Dig is probably a better ground move than Fissure. Plus, with Dugtrio's speed, Gen 1 Slash can cause some real damage. Luckily, Pokemon Yellow vastly improves Giovanni's team. For one, Rhyhorn is swapped out with Persian, who not only has higher base stats but also reduces the water weakness. And again, Gen 1 Slash, this time from a Gen 1 Persian. In addition, there's also moveset improvements for the other members. All of them have Earthquake and good coverage. Next, we get to his teams in their remakes, who each took turns nerfing Giovanni a bit. In Fire Red and Leaf Green, he has Rhyhorn instead of Persian again, but his ace Rhydon has now also become a Rhyhorn, and Nidoqueen and Nidoking no longer have Thunder, making water types much more powerful against this team again. And while Let's Go does have his ace be Rhydon again, he now no longer has his extra Rhyhorn, now only having 4 Pokemon. While this team's coverage is better than his Fire Red Leaf Green's team, it's mainly for grass types with nothing to cover for water types. So honestly, this is an occasion where I think the Gen 1 team is the best. Specifically, Giovanni's Pokemon Yellow team. This team has better coverage, can't completely be swept by grass or water types, and Gen 1 Persian can be a critical hit menace, especially with Giovanni's knowing Slash, Screech, and Double Team. So maybe Giovanni isn't exactly the strongest trainer, but with the wrong team composition, he may still give you a rough time, as expected of the one who took over an entire universe in another time. Next up, we head over to Sinnoh, where we meet our next specialist, the charming lady of the Sinnoh Elite Four, Bertha. Bertha is the third ranking member of the Sinnoh Elite Four, and she seems to have a connection to Agatha of the Kanto Elite Four. In Gen 5, Chantal drew the connection between their appearances, and ever since, people have theorized whether or not they're related, and Legends Arceus has somewhat confirmed this theory. We meet the character Charm, who seems to be an ancestor of both. She even has a Rhydon and Gengar, the aces of the two trainers. But let's see if Bertha's family lineage makes for a tough trainer. In Diamond and Pearl and their remakes, Bertha's team is Quagsire, Sudowoodo, Golem, Whiscash, and Hippowdon. And in Platinum, she swaps Quagsire and Sudowoodo for Gliscor and Rhyperior, with Rhyperior being her new ace. In Diamond and Pearl, her team's movesets aren't all that impressive. For one, her first 3 Pokemon have Sandstorm taking up a move slot, which yes, could be annoying, but you may see that a grass type utterly sweeps this team. 3 of her 5 Pokemon are 4 times weak to grass. Platinum does improve this team, but there are still way too many 4 times weaknesses. Sure, the team can't completely be swept by one type, but all but 1 of her Pokemon have at least one 4 times weakness. Finally is Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl, which as mentioned is the same team as her Diamond and Pearl Pokemon. However, her team now has better movesets, all have held items, and almost competitively viable EV, IV, and nature builds. Quagsire is made to completely cripple you if you don't have a grass move, badly poisoning your team and then staying up with recover and leftovers. Whiscash has a Rindo Berry to handle at least one grass move, and Hippowdon has a Chesta Berry to get a free use of rest. Even still, her team is severely weak to grass like the original, and only Whiscash and Hippowdon have coverage for this. Overall, Bertha can definitely cause you trouble if you're unprepared. Not having a grass move immediately makes her a scarier opponent. She may just make her ancestors proud in the end. Next, we mine our way to Unova to meet the underground boss, Clay. Clay is many things. A successful business tycoon who started from nothing, a loving father who won't let just anyone date his little girl, and above all else, he inadvertently got Dream Minecraft into some Twitter drama. I've talked about this before, so I won't go too into it, but SaltyDKDan once got hashtag Clay is over party trending on Twitter, a hashtag that was meant to be directed at Clay Pokemon, but accidentally got tied to Dream Minecraft since Clay is his real name, and he had privated his Twitter the day this all happened. So yeah, Clay Pokemon is pretty epic, but is he a tough trainer? In Black and White, Clay acts as the 5th gym leader. In this team, he has Krokorok, Palpitoad, and Excadrill. The scary thing about Clay is how things can snowball out of control. Just ask SaltyDKDan if you need proof. He has a Moxie Krokorok, so God help you if he KOs just one of your Pokemon and then outspeeds. Something that's very possible with Clay specializing in Bulldoze. Palpitoad isn't too much trouble but is only weak to grass. Finally, Excadrill, a fast and powerful ground steel type with great coverage. Bone Claws will increase attack and accuracy, making Rock Slide more powerful and almost guaranteed to hit. Counters are a little harder to get for Clay. You do have some great grass and water type options, but Excadrill being a steel type can complicate things. Next is Clay's Black 2 and White 2 team, where he's still the 5th gym leader. In this team, Clay's Palpitoad is swapped out for Sandslash, but his other Pokemon are also nerfed a little bit. Krokorok no longer has Moxie for boost or Swagger to slow you down, and Excadrill no longer has Hone Claws. Overall, these teams are definitely tough, especially since as the 5th gym leader, your team building options are more limited, especially in the original Black and White with the more limited regional decks. And if you're reckless, you may have your own embarrassing loss. Second to last, we must sail to Alola to meet the youngest trainer here, the newest Kahuna of the Alola Islands, Hapu. In the story of the Alola games, Hapu becomes the Pony Island Kahuna. So does she have the power to back up that position? In Sun and Moon, her team is Alolan Dugtrio, Gastrodon, Flygon, and Mudsdale, with her Ultra team being higher leveled and swapping Dugtrio for Golurk. Hapu's teams are very defensive, with Gastrodon and Flygon helping with some of Ground's weaknesses. Most notably though is her ace Mudsdale. Since this is Alola, you'll have a Z-move to worry about. On top of that, stamina can cause some real trouble if you're not careful. You need a special attacker for her Mudsdale if you want to avoid trouble. And I can speak on this because I watched my brother struggle with Hapu. When he played Moon, his only ground counters were physical attackers. Notably, his plan to defeat Mudsdale was Bullet Seed from Toucannon. So yeah, he didn't have a good time that day. Hapu may be the youngest trainer here, but she's certainly powerful. You're in for a rough time if you don't have a special attacker by your side, or use a multi-hit move. Finally, we stop at the Paldea region to meet the final specialist, the receptionist of the Paldean Pokemon League, Rika. Apparently, in the original Japanese dialogue, Rika speaks in the 3rd person, so she's always saying her own name when referring to herself, something I'm kind of glad they they did away with in English. It's probably cuter in Japanese than in English. Rika's team is Whiscash, Camerupt, Donphan, Dugtrio, and Clodsire. So we're back to some 4x weaknesses. Just like Hapu, Rika makes use of the gimmick of her region, this time terrestrializing Clodsire to the ground Terra type, one who is immune to water moves thanks to Water Absorb. Though I still have some concerns about Rika's team, most notably is her ace Clodsire. Clodsire is a very bulky Pokemon who I also had fun with on my team. However, Clodsire tends to struggle in the offense department, though at least Rika has planned for this with a Toxic Protect strategy. Overall, Rika certainly works for an introduction to the Paldean Elite Four. Great representation for the most gendered Pokemon trainer.
Oh my god.
Yeah, I know, gender.
And so now with all 5 ground type specialists analyzed, let's make a final decision on which of them is the toughest, based on a tournament where you wonderful people got to vote, and my own decision based on my personal experiences. First, the viewer voted tournament. With an odd number of trainers, we started with an elimination round, in which Giovanni was completely obliterated. 62% of 79 votes, with second place only having 20%. So it's safe to say that you guys have had the easiest time with Giovanni. So much for the self-proclaimed strongest trainer. Next we go to round 1 of the actual tournament between Bertha and Clay, which Bertha dominated with just over 3/4 of 158 votes. Clay was the aforementioned second place in the elimination round after all. In round 2 we had Hapu versus Rika, where Hapu won with 71% of 189 votes. Now we reach the finals of the tournament between Bertha and Hapu. And if you thought that Bertha dominated in her first go here, then get this. 88% with just over 200 votes. This is both the most votes and one of the biggest landslides we've seen. But with that, we end in the losers bracket to decide 3rd and 4th place. It was Clay versus Rika, and Clay won by 70% of 176 votes. So this is how you wonderful people rank the ground specialists. Giovanni in 5th, Rika in 4th, Clay in 3rd, Hapu in 2nd, and Bertha ranking as your pick for the toughest ground specialists. And I could imagine BDSP helping in that decision, but how would I rank these trainers? My ranking is Giovanni, Rika, Hapu, Bertha, and finally Clay in 1st. However, this has the caveat that the top 3 are honestly pretty close. I mainly base this on who poses the biggest limitation for the player. Hapu has a Z-move and stamina, Bertha's BDSP team is decked out with a near competitively viable setup, and with Clay you're limited on what you can have access to. And so for me personally, I decided to give the edge to Clay. And there you have it folks, the toughest ground specialist of Pokemon. Which ranking do you agree with more? What about your ranking? Let me know in the comments below, and become a member if you're interested. It's only $2 a month. Have a nice day, you wonderful people.